Welcome to the meeting sponsored by P-Town and the Federated Conservationists of Westchester. Tonight, we're delighted to have two people from the Hudson River Explorer Program speaking. First up will be Neil Betez, who is a climate team coordinator for the Hudson River Estuary Program. His job is to work with municipalities, make them more resilient to climate change. Neil's background includes working as an environmental scientist, focused on urban ecology, which is about understanding how ecological processes operate in cities, how our actions affect them, and what we can do to make our cities sustainable in the face of climate change. And served two terms as a town supervisor in town Newport. Also with us is Jim Katz, who is the road stream crossing implementation specialist for the Hudson River Estuary Program. His responsibilities include connecting partners and technical assistance, outreach materials, and funding opportunities to improve aquatic connectivity in the Hudson River Estuary watershed. Jim's background and past employment with the DEC and other Hudson Valley conservation organizations. Neil, it's all yours.
Thank you. Still trying to set the Zooming up. Let me know if there are things you cannot see, but thank you for inviting us here. My name is Neil Betez. I am the climate team coordinator for the Hudson River Estuary Program. And before I get into exactly what we're doing, I want to give some background. So there's the, because it gets really confusing when people start talking about climate change. There's the clean energy communities or the CEC program. Then there's the climate smart communities, which is the CSC certification program. So a lot of people are familiar with that. You get a lot of points for the climate smart community. The Hudson River Estuary Program, we work with the climate smart communities program, but we're a little bit different. So we do some of their actions, but I just want to put it all in context so people understood that. And so sorry if you can't read everything. I don't know how to get this off the screen, but our goal is to work with communities and make them to undertake actions that make them more resilient and adapt to climate change. So what is climate adaptation and resilience? So a lot of people, when we start talking about climate change, they really think about mitigation. And, that's how, reducing greenhouse gases, how do you transition to low carbon, net zero, solar panels, things like that. And that's really important. But what we're focused on is called adaptation and resilience. And so adaptation and resilience, these are actions that help communities adjust, prepare, and respond and recover from the expected risks of the climate hazards. And so there's a bunch of examples here, and I'm going to be talking more about them as we go forward. And so, adaptive waterfront planning, green infrastructure, planting trees, things like that. And so why does it matter? Well, this graph right here shows what the predicted changes are for the future for several, this is for heat, temperatures in the North Hudson region. So I'll get into more details here, but even if we were to go with very intermediate emissions, which is the most likely scenario that we're going to end up with, we can expect to see changes in temperature, precipitation, extreme events. And so we need to start making sure that our communities are resilient and that we can adapt because we know we're going to be facing these challenges going forward. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about these. When I talk about climate hazards, we're talking about increasing temperatures, changing precipitation patterns, and rising sea levels. And what that's going to result in is heat waves, short-term drought, and flooding. And so those are the things that we need to deal with as communities. And New York State has put projections together for what we can expect to be the changes going forward. And they've broken down the state by different regions. And so in the Hudson River Valley, we have 3 of those regions. We have the North Hudson region, which is Albany, Columbia, Rensselaer, Saratoga, Schenectady, and Washington counties, and the South Hudson, which is Dutchess, Orange, Putnam, Rockland, and Westchester. So we're in the South Hudson region. And I'm going to be talking about some numbers, and there's this SSP 5 to 8.5, high emissions, intermediate emissions. It's really confusing, but I'm going to try to explain it so you can see what the numbers are. So I have another slide here, the next one. So when I talked earlier about these two different predictions, there is the very high emissions scenario, and then there's the intermediate emissions scenario. And you can see that those are the projected changes in temperature over the next century. And so what New York State did, the people that put the estimates together, they took those very high estimates and those intermediate estimates, the 2 to 4.5 and the 5 to 8.5, and then they modeled both of them, and then they combined the results. And then they gave them two numbers. So the 25th percentile and the 75th percentile. So if you look at the top, 2.8 to 4 degrees Fahrenheit changes, that's the 25th and the 75th percentile. So 25% of the estimates are below that, 25% are above that. That's half the estimates they average together. So the range is in the middle there. And then each of those decades represents a 30-year average. So for example, when I say 2080, what I'm talking about is the average across 2070 to 2099. And so hopefully that's helpful. And so what are the predictions? So you can see on the bottom, the predictions for New York State, they vary across different regions, but for the South Hudson region, sorry, which is what these are for, the prediction is that averaged over the entire year, we can expect to see increases of between 4.1 degrees Fahrenheit and 6.1 degrees Fahrenheit by the 2050s. These are the ones that are bold at the top, and 5.7 and 10 degrees Fahrenheit by 2080. And then, you can see there's changes in the winter, spring, but lots of them are there. And I'm not going to go through all of them, just that we know we're going to see changes and we need to deal with that. And then precipitation, the total precipitation projected is projected to increase between 4 and 11% by 2050 and 7 and 17% by 2080s. And this is going to mostly be in the winter. If you look at the numbers at the top here, the biggest increases are in the winter and the spring. And what that means is that we're going to get these big, heavy rain events, but the soil's already saturated at that time. So we're likely to get a lot more flooding and because of the increased ground saturation. So we need to prepare for these things going forward, and it's going to get worse and worse. And then extreme events is the other predictions that they've made. Remember this past summer, how hot it was, right? So those are either heat waves or days above 95 degrees, right? And so right now, the South Hudson has historically experienced an average of 4 days over 95 degrees. This is projected to increase to 13 to 29 days by the 2050s and 18 to 57 days by the end of the century. So we're going to get a lot more of these heat waves, and we need to start dealing with those things. And so what do we do to help with that? So the estuary program, our climate team, we support communities to advance climate adaptation and resilience actions. A few things that we want to highlight to people is that we know it's hard for municipalities, especially smaller municipalities and disadvantaged communities. They have limited resources and the plates are already full. And so we have to make it easy for them to do these things, and that's our job. And one of the reasons we really need to help disadvantaged populations is because they're disproportionately affected by these changes. And so we need to start making sure that we help them out. And what we really want to do is build a regional culture of adaptation and resilience. And I read through your website. That's one of your focuses, is building a regional approach. And the reason for that is none of these changes are going to be happening at the local level, right? Climate change is going to happen regionally. And so we need to adapt to it regionally. You can't, and if we're working together as multiple municipalities, you're more likely to have collaboration and you're more likely to have a positive effect. If one municipality does one thing, another does another thing, they may work, but if everyone's doing a lot of the same focus things, you're going to get more collaboration and you're more likely to have a successful result. And so what we want to do is we want to explore a range of adaptation pathways, especially with a nature-based approach. And so that's the other thing. I'm glad I'm talking to you as an organization because you are a conservation organization, right? And what I'm finding is a lot of the climate team focuses on mitigation. And while that's important, I want to bring in the conservation groups because they really know how to advocate and push for some of these nature-based approaches. And I'm going to talk more about those in a minute. So these nature-based solutions, a lot of times historically we've thought that preserving nature is just good for nature, but now what we realize is actually a really good way to adapt to climate change. And so I'm going to talk more about them, but these nature-based approaches can range from wetland conservation and restoration all the way to establishing greenways like linear corridors, like trails and parks. They also help with nature-based approaches to climate adaptation. And the thing about them is they all work together to reduce like erosion, improve water quality, mitigate flood risks, and they adapt to climate change going forward. Versus if you were to put in gray infrastructure, like culverts, once you build it, it's done. The clock starts ticking the day you finished. And then you have to fix it in a couple of years. Versus if you do like a nature-based approach, like restore a wetland, that will adapt to climate change over time. And it's going to solve multiple problems at the same time, instead of just like maybe raising the roadway, right? So what we want to do is promote these nature-based approaches because you can solve multiple problems at the same time. And it's also not, it's not like a one-off problem that you solve. It works going forward. So some examples of these nature-based approaches in urban areas, there's green infrastructure like rain gardens that helps manage stormwater runoff. It also helps with keeping the land moist during a drought period. So historically, we wanted to get that water out of the municipalities as fast as possible. Get it in the drains and get it in the river, and we solved our problem. Now what we're finding is actually we want to keep it there because it's going to like keep the roadway from flooding, but then in 2 weeks when you have a heat wave, you then have the water that you need. And if you have wells, that's going to help you. And if you're a farmer, that's going to help you with your crops. So there's lots of multiple benefits for this. So floodplains is another example. If you restore natural floodplains, you're going to help with flooding, but you're also going to help with drought. So things like that. And then in coastal areas, you put up natural buffers. That's going to help with storm surges. So some of the key benefits of these approaches are, like I said, by slowing water down, increasing the water, you're increasing storage capacity, you're going to reduce the flooding, and you're going to help with the droughts later on. Erosion control, some of the same sort of things, like once you restore a stream bank, it's going to keep it from eroding, but it's also going to keep the water there for the long term when you need it in a couple of weeks. So they all have multiple benefits, and we'll talk a little bit more about those, but I just wanted to keep pushing that nature-based approach. And so if you can go to our website, you can look at, these are all the different things that we do to help municipalities out. So we have what's called a Climate Adaptive Design Studio. I'll talk more about that in a minute. We help with climate smart community, different adaptation actions. I'm going to talk some more about that. We do some grants for climate adaptation, but what we really want to do is point out to people that the other departments in the DEC and the Department of State, there's a lot more money out there from the Bond Act that they should really take advantage of now. Because some of those, I'll talk more about that too, but some of those matches are as low as 10%, which is really good. And so the way we do these things is we work with a couple different collaborators. One is the Hudson Valley Flood Resilience Network, or FRN. So they bring municipalities together and they help educate them and coordinate their responses. And they try to take a regional approach as well. And I have another slide. This is a map of, right now, there's 38 different municipalities that are in the flood resilient network, and there's 35 different organizations that help out with it. And people should join this if they want to be part of it. I think Westchester County is a member of the FRN, but if different municipalities can join as well. It doesn't cost you any money, but it opens up a lot of doors. In fact, there's a presentation tomorrow on a stormwater solution about Hastings on Hudson, what they did and how they got their grant money. And then there's a meeting in the end of the month on March 27th. There's going to be a presentation on funding for flood resilience, how you can get that grant money, some local laws that you can pass to actually increase your resilience, maybe change your floodplains, things like that. And then there's a presentation on stream management. We also work with Cornell Cooperative Extension in 6 different counties: Columbia, Dutchess Green, Rensselaer, Rockland, Ulster, and they then partner with municipalities to do a bunch of the different pledge elements or PE7. Those are for enhancing community resilience to climate change. And they do some which are under pledge element 9, which are mostly education, things like that. And then we also work with the Hudson Valley Regional Council on the Climate Action Planning Institute, or CAPI Adapt. And that's in Dutchess and Westchester. And I'm going to go into some more details with that right now in a minute. These are a lot of the different actions that you can take that are going to help you become a climate smart community. Many of them will also help you become more climate adaptive and resilience. I'm going to talk more about number 1 and number 3, the climate vulnerability assessment and the climate adaptation plan. And we worked with the Hudson Valley Regional Council on what's called a climate vulnerability assessment and adaptation plan, or CVAAP. It's blocked out on the top. But basically what that is it's a climate vulnerability assessment, and then you put that together in a climate adaptation chapter. And they work with 15 municipalities in Westchester and Dutchess County. And one of them was Westchester County. And this climate vulnerability assessment and adaptation plan, what it involves is, first you identify what the climate hazards within an area are. Then you identify the assets and the populations that are likely to be exposed to those hazards. And then you look at you assess the sensitivity and how much capacity they have to adapt to those exposures. And then you try to increase the amount of awareness and community interaction, because that's how you really get these plans adopted and effective. Is you need feedback from the community. You can't just have 3 people in the room make the decision, because people have to buy into it. And so some examples of those different assets is infrastructure. That includes transportation, road, culverts, railroads, public transit, water infrastructure, like drinking water, stormwater, energy and communication infrastructure, like electric lines, cable. We all know that these things are what get affected by storms. Then you have environmental assets: forests, wetlands, parks, trails, things like that. And then there's the social part, different aspects of your community. You may have seniors, you may have little children, you may have pregnant women that are also very vulnerable to some of these heat waves. They're finding it has a big effect on their health. And then food banks, shelters, they also have to be resilient to climate change as well. And so you identify those assets, and then you have to come up with ways that they adapt in this plan. And so some of the examples that they have come up with to adapt, some of them are not nature-based, like, well, you need a backup power supply for your cooling center. You have to do that. But you might want to right-size the culverts, maybe remove dams. We're going to talk more about that in a minute. You want to put some green infrastructure, and then for environmental adaptation, you could restore wetlands, stream buffers. You could put a conservation overlay zone in. Some of these things, you put that conservation overlay zone in now, you're going to solve problems in 50 years. Or if you change your floodplain, rules. You may, yes, people are going to say, well, now I can't build a house there. You're taking away my property rights. It's like, well, yes, I could also say that I'm keeping that house that you're building from flooding in 50 years, right? Your job is to protect the person from building a house in the wrong place that makes it worthless in 50 years, right? And then there's like social examples of adaptation. Plant trees in urban areas. You need to plant those trees now because in 50 years, it's going to be hot and it's going to be too late. You can't plant the tree and have it give you cooling in 50 years when it's only 5 feet tall. And so after you do this, you have to have the municipality, they have to adopt the plan, and then they have to make sure that the different department heads are aware of the plans and they start taking those steps to accomplish those goals. But then you have to put things out to bid, you have to get grants. So it's a long-term process. And the time to start this is now because we know these changes are coming and we know there's a lot of state money out there from the Bond Act. And so, yes, it's not easy, but it's not going to get easier and it's not going to get cheaper. And if you solve some problems now, especially multiple problems with a single solution, you're benefiting yourself, right? And your residents. And so some of the examples of things that we've done, I mentioned this CAD phase 1. We worked with Cornell University, landscape architecture students, and they put these designs together for different towns in the Hudson Valley along the Hudson River. How could you do nature-based solutions to some of the waterfronts? That helped the city of Hudson get a $125,000 grant to let them do phase 2, which advanced the designs. And then they recently, in this past year, got another grant to develop the final engineering plans. So they're moving forward on this nature-based redesign of the waterfront in the city of Hudson. Other things that we've done is we've been promoting strategies to enhance shoreline ecology with like a nature-based approach. And you can see a picture from 2013. But my internet just about that. Okay.
You might have to share it.
I'm not sharing now. Okay. Sorry about that.
I'd be able to drag the bar down.
Sorry. It's not still not to. Do I get rid of that screen again?
Is it sharing?
Is he sharing?
It's sharing, but I think it's sharing.
You're okay. I think it's fine.
Okay, so this is just a picture of Cold Spring Park in 2013 and 2023. You can see that there's a big improvement by building sustainable shoreline. And another thing that we do is called Trees for Tribs. This is Hudson River Estuary Program. We plant trees along tributaries, and that makes them more resilient to extreme weather events. And this is a picture in Falling Waters Preserve in 2016 when they planted the trees, and here it is in 2021. So you can see a big change, and that's just the way to do it. We're doing some presentations about the different projects that we've done. We did one on March 5th, one on March 6th today. There's another one coming up on March 10th and on the 12th. You can go to our website if you want to, but we also have the recordings on the website. So if you've missed any, you can go and look at different projects that we've done, their presentations, and it kind of helps you figure out things that you can do as well. And then finally, I want to re-emphasize the importance of the Bond Act. So we have some grants, the estuary program, but our grants are pretty small. Usually less than $100,000, maybe $50,000. It's hard to do some of these bigger projects. We mostly help with planning and getting people to first base. But there's a lot of money out there right now from the Bond Act. And a lot of it is going to be focused on issues that have a lot of effect on climate adaptation and resilience. And so this announcement just came out, I think, in the last few days. There's 80 million in funding available for climate resiliency projects. There is no max on what the amount you can apply for some of these grants. There's a webinar that's coming up where you can register and figure out which different projects. And so, but for the Resilient Watershed Grants Program in particular, it's a 10% match, which is a really low amount. Mostly it's 80%, but this is I would encourage people to look into this and try to take advantage of it now. There's going to be a webinar for this grant coming up on March 12th from 10 to 11, and I have the website there. But if you just Google it, you can find this on the DEC website and register, or we can send the links to you after this meeting. And that's it. So we can answer questions now or later after we're both done talking.
If anybody has any questions right now, take them, or we can wait till after.
A couple.
Please.
So I noticed that with Cornell, you don't work with Westchester.
I'm sorry?
Cornell, the 6 counties that you work with Cornell, it doesn't include Westchester.
Are you talking about the cooperative extensions?
Yes.
I'm meeting with them tomorrow.
Excellent. Okay, good. Okay.
And so that's the way the program started. But that's not who we're limiting it to. We won't work with any municipality. And one of the reasons I'm here today is because we need to expand who we're working with. And, historically, when programs start, you work with the people that are easy to work with because that's how you get things done. But what we're worried about is, we need to work with the people that we have not worked with yet. Because if we just continue to work with the people we've worked with, and another 10 years goes by, they're going to be in a lot of trouble. And so we need to make sure that we work with everyone. And so we don't limit it to just where we have the Cornell property extensions.
In that same vein, the climate vulnerability assessment, you list all the municipalities you work with. You're working with the village of Ossining, but not the town of
Yes,
Ossining.
they are. It was listed
The town of Ossining is listed?
above it.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'll take that back. All right. So, the other thing, I'm on the planning board in the town of Ossining, and one of many hats. So the rain gardens and the trees, we actually my community, my little neighborhood, we did a Trees for Tribs, and it's actually gorgeous. The red twig we've bent the branches down, and now we have new plants to move and everything. It's really gorgeous, but it's a lot of maintenance, and I think that it would be really helpful with the grant if there was I think it's so hard to get these things successful if there's maintenance built into the grants. I think that would be good, and I don't think that is right now. It's just you plant them, and then most people just leave.
I think it's because we have a limited time frame for the grants. That's my guess. The grant goes out and it's like a 2-year window, right? Open and then closes. So we can't give like a 10-year grant. I don't think we're allowed to.
Well, if there would be some way to educate people about there was just a big tree planting and I'm not going to mention the place, but they best of intentions, they planted hundreds and hundreds of trees.
Fair enough.
I wasn't going to mention it. And they all died because they didn't water it this past year, which we had, as you know, very hot temperatures. And it's just really a shame, but people don't understand that it's beyond just the planting. So that's just my observation. And same thing with rain gardens and all that. So it's after everything's planted, there's, a couple years worth of dedication that needs to be. So that'd be good if that could be folded in.
I mean, but there are, if you go to the Climate Smart Communities page, they have different plans that you can do. Like you can change the the rules for parking lots under the town zoning code and require them to plant trees in the parking lots. Right, and so that's, gonna solve problems over the next 50 years, so if you have, right now, people, they don't, like, we don't have trees in the parking lots, but in 50 years, if you have trees in the parking lot, that's gonna keep that parking lot a lot cooler and keep a lot of that runoff from leaving the park too. So, there are things that, things like that are being promoted for municipalities. They're also, but there's lots of different ways to do it. And the municipality doesn't necessarily need to do all of them. Like some of the things, can be by changing some of the town. There are model laws out there to change some of these things as well.
Yeah, we have a really good tree code, but I'm on, again, planning board, and the problem is getting those trees to live to 5 years. So we're trying to get people to commit, put up money that they get back, the trees live 5 years, but it's, that's the biggest issue is after the planting.
So I think what you're saying is to try to build into the actual planting program and restoration program is some type of education element that's also looking at how do you maintain that. Maybe you can't offer the grant for years on end, but starting at home. Yeah, but even some direction on how to advance into the next 5-10 years where they don't die. And yeah, but I had a question. 2 questions. We have a real life issue in our town of Ossining right now where, there are acres of land that potentially are being threatened to bring down, let's say, 8,000 trees. And the grading of the land is such that it impacts a tributary that has flooded historically over the last 5 to 10 years and really has caused major damage to neighborhoods downslope. So I'm just wondering, what is the timing of reaching out to the Hudson River Estuary Program in terms of being able to provide assistance to, let's say, a major project that really could plan it differently and take into consideration a lot of what you're bringing up? And do you offer any help with going after funding for grants? With grants?
We can't help write the grants.
Yeah, or go after, like, we don't act as a, applicant on your behalf.
No, I understand, but do you provide any assistance with?
We can provide some
approach the
assistance
grant?
depending on what you're looking for.
Or you just hire a
and what
grant
the
writer,
project
yeah.
is.
But like, what kind of timing is involved?
Well, once we announce grants, then we can't talk to you at all. Because we have to be fair to everyone and we can't say, well, then if you got the grant, another municipality will say, well, you've been talking to them the whole time, no wonder they got the, right? So we can talk and interact with municipalities at any time until we release the request for applications. And then we can't talk about the grants, which is why we have webinars ahead of time. But one of the things that I'm going to be trying to do under my job is understand which grants are out there and what those grants are allowed to fund, and then help give that information to municipalities, because even if it's my full-time job, it's incredibly complicated. Like they have different requirements, different agencies. And so one of the things I'm going to try to do is, really, I go to these seminars, I'm going to go to webinars, I'm going to dig in deep. And so I can explain to the municipalities like, oh, well, you should be applying for this, and this grant. Right. And you can hire, it costs money to apply for grants. But you can hire people to write the grants for you, or you can, sometimes you can hire your own engineering firm that the municipality already works with. They already have all of the information. They have the GIS files, everything else. And they know the problems because they probably go to the planning board meetings and they're like, yeah, that's going to flood. That's why we need to work on it. So I always suggest work with the groups that you trust and that have an understanding. But our goal is to try to help you. Like I said, our grants are pretty small, but we're going to try to help people get the bigger grants now that it's out there.
But apart from the grants, like you were talking about the climate vulnerability assessment, and that doesn't, that is what you do, correct? Like you don't need
So that's what
a grant for that. Like, what's the timing for that, you know?
Well, that's what the Cornell Cooperative Extensions have been doing. They've been reaching out to the municipalities and doing the interaction with them. We have some templates if people want to do that, and they can do it on their own. If you read through the different, once these are all released, the ones from Westchester, right, you'll be able to read through them, and you'll see that, there's a lot of similarities among the different plans, right? We all have the same vulnerabilities, right? Because we're like I said, climate change is not happening maybe some municipalities, flooding will be a bigger impact in others, if like you're right on the waterfront for the Hudson River. But mostly, if you read through someone else's plan, you can say, well, yeah, we're going to have that same problem. And, you maybe don't even need to come up with your own vulnerability assessment. You can read your neighboring towns. I think in 15 years, every town's not going to be doing its own vulnerability assessment. They're going to say, well, I've read through 10 of them and they're all, 90% the same. So even if you don't have one right now, I would say read through another municipalities, and that may make you think like, oh, maybe that's what we should be working on. Maybe that's what we should apply for a grant for. You don't necessarily need to even do the vulnerability assessment before you apply for the grants, because talk to your highway superintendent. They know where it floods, right? Or the DPW, like, we'll put a whole map together and I'm like, yeah, I know that floods. Yeah. They live there, right? You probably know what your problems are. Talk to your elected officials.
Mhm.
And so also, they've probably already put together hazard mitigation plans. And so a lot of these vulnerability assessments are based on hazard mitigation plans that the municipalities and the counties have to put together every 5 years. And so they already have those. And so you can read through your current hazard mitigation plan, and it already kind of lays out what your different hazards are and what your elected officials have proposed to mitigate those hazards. So this, I wouldn't say, well, we have to do this before we can apply for the grant. Eventually, you want to do an actual action and not just put plans.
So does the Hudson River Estuary Program provide services apart from grants? Like, do you have to have a grant in order to enroll in your services, to solicit?
I mean, we're happy to, like we're here today trying to educate people on things. We don't necessarily come down and write a plan for you, but, we can try to, if you don't have a Cornell Cooperative Extension to work with, I can try to get you, some draft plans and try to help you out or stuff like that. But, right now we have a team of one.
Donna's comment about trees dying was interesting. One of the things, including with some of the other fellows at DEC, we've been trying to promote to this forum shared arborists. So going back to shared services, I don't know whether DOS would cover that, or you might cover cost of a shared arborist for a variety of municipalities.
I think I'm not sure if the state may have, I think the city of Kingston has an arborist, and I think they got a state grant I may be wrong, that I think is funding that arborist for the first couple of years. And so, they're a bigger city, but right now there's a lot of state money. There was federal money. I don't know how long that's going to be there for urban tree plantings. And so I think the part of that grant may have been like doing the plantings and bringing the forester in for a couple of years to make sure they survive the first 5 years.
I think that was done in the village of Ossining. They got like 80 trees planted. Yeah, it did completely transform the parks, the 2 parks that they planted them in.
They didn't die?
No, because
Any more questions?
there was somebody holding their hand to make sure that they watered them.
All right. Yeah.
I'm Jim Katz. I'm the road stream crossing implementation specialist at the estuary program. I work pretty closely with Neil, but we're on different teams at the estuary program. So today I'll be talking about what the estuary program is itself, give you a little overview. Neil kind of started with that. And what makes an aquatic barrier, why they're bad, what we're doing to help mitigate them, and what you guys can do, and then if there's any questions. So the estuary program, we are helping communities conserve and ensure resilient estuary and watershed for present and future generations through these goals of our action agenda. You can see the green area there. It's a little off the screen there, but it's essentially all of the land area that water flows to the Hudson, including some of Rockland and Orange County, which flow down through New Jersey, but end up making their way into the Hudson down by the city. I work for the watershed team. We take a watershed approach. So we try and look at problems, not just at a site specific level, but how they're going to affect the entire watershed upstream and downstream. We do water quality monitoring, aquatic barrier restoration, riparian buffer restorations for the Trees for Tribs program, watershed planning and characterizations, and education and outreach. So one thing I'll mention is that I'm not here to talk about natural barriers, so beaver dams and waterfalls. Ecosystems have evolved around these barriers, and beaver dams actually are pretty functional when it comes to the ecosystem itself. So a lot of the natural functions are still there. Water's still flowing. Most organisms can get through. And they're a lot more biodiverse than you would see in like a man-made impoundment. I'm not going to go through this entire image here, but you can just kind of see the stark difference between the two. The beaver dam on top and the man-made dam on the bottom. So what I am talking about are structures that allow water to flow under a road from one side to the other, and that's specifically streams. So I'm not talking about stormwater or drainage ditches or anything like that. And when we talk about these, we're talking about culverts and bridges. Culverts are under 20 feet across from bank to bank. So not like the width of the actual structure, but from bank to bank. And bridges are over 20 feet. And that's important because oftentimes when it becomes a bridge, the management of the structure can change. So it may be a town structure when it's a culvert, but if it becomes a bridge, the county may become responsible. That depends on where you are. So it doesn't take much to make a barrier. These are often caused by misplaced or misaligned structures or structures that are too small that result in changing the water velocity and depth. It can cause downstream scour, unpassable water in the structure, free falls, and a lack of stream bed. Oftentimes at the end of a structure, you'll see a big scour pool where all the fish sit because they can't get up past that. So the structure should be invisible to the ecology and biology of the stream. So the fish, the water, sediment should all flow and move through the stream freely. Fixing these barriers are important. Streams are organism highways, not just for aquatic life, but for terrestrial life too. And mitigation restores connectivity and ecological function. Dams and poor lane filled culverts can act as roadblocks, just stopping population movement and preventing migratory species from getting to the habitat they need to. Undersized culverts can create flood hazards and cause infrastructure damage, so road flooding and overtopping. Dams can also be safety hazards. So, there's the big dams, but we also have in our area a lot of low head dams or smaller dams that are actually not regulated and unidentified. So those can cause a really dangerous hydraulic just below them that recreational users can get trapped in. And they increasing or removing barriers increases streams resilience to changes in land use and climate. So it's one of the focused strategies of what Neil's talking about. So these are just a couple photos from the flooding in Peekskill Hollow from about a year ago. You guys may have seen some of these. These are from Joe Scapoli in Peekskill. I think some of these may be up in Putnam Valley, but it's all from Peekskill Hollow Creek. And, this is just some of the stuff that we're trying to prevent. These structures end up getting plugged by debris or just not being able to handle the capacity of the larger storms that we're getting more frequently now. And we end up with a lot of road damage that could potentially be avoided. So because we take a watershed approach, we end up addressing a lot of issues, not only at the site, but upstream and downstream. So habitat fragmentation, diversity, sediment and debris transport, water quality, just the hydrology, improving flow. It helps improve maintenance and replacement costs. So the municipalities aren't having to go back and replace the same culvert over and over again. Reduces liability, prevents dam failure, improves and increases recreational value, and can increase property value. So you asked, do we provide technical support? We do provide some technical support. We share data. We have a model that we have come up with Cornell to model storm passability for all of these structures that have been assessed through a protocol that I'll talk about. We also do outreach and education like this, and we help implement priority projects through our grants program. So this is I'm going to mention this, the North Atlantic Aquatic Connectivity Collaborative. This is a organization who developed the protocols for assessing road stream crossings, and the majority of the Northeast and East Coast use their protocols to assess culverts for organism passage and condition. The double slide there. You can see here in the green area, this is the estuary watershed boundary, with the green area indicating the municipal area that has at least 50% of their culverts assessed through the NAC protocols. So we're at about 75% of the area of the watershed at this point. We've also worked with municipalities to develop road stream crossing management plans through our grants program. So that's one of the things that can be done through our stewardship grants is planning. These municipalities, we have about 45 plans right now. The majority of them also have conceptual designs for priority projects. And you can see here in the orange, these ones just have inventory. So at the beginning, they were just doing inventories without designs. And then we switched over a little later to requiring designs included, because we were finding that we'd get a plan in place and then that plan would sit on the shelf and nobody would do anything with it, because coming up with designs takes a whole nother funding. So if we could kill two birds with one stone, that was kind of the idea. So in Putnam and Westchester counties here, you can see all these points represent road stream crossings. And in the green, these are the assessed crossings, and red are unassessed. So in this area, there's a lot of unassessed crossings still. This is kind of like the big gap in our data set is down here. And I only started a year ago, so I'm not really sure why that is. I don't think there's any specific reason. I think it's just where the need was at the time. Just to give you an idea of in Putnam County, you can see here, there's the red dots are severe barriers. So this is just showing the assessed culverts. So red is a severe barrier and orange is a significant barrier. There's a lot throughout Putnam County. The yellow triangles are dams. Those are dams that are regulated by New York State. One thing to note is that a recent study in the Hudson Valley showed that there are actually 4 to 12 times as many dams that we know about through the New York State Dams Inventory, which is this data set. So a lot of those unregulated, unidentified, we call them ghost dams, are still out there, not in use, just due to the historic nature of our area. This is Westchester County, so you can see just as many barriers, not as many significant and severe culvert crossing barriers, but there's also not as many assessments done down here yet. So that could change as this area becomes more assessed. So steps for a successful replacement, engaging the local highway supervisors is critical because without them on board, you can't really do anything. They are the ones that are in charge of the structures. Then a NAC assessment has to be conducted. For the majority of our grants and any kind of like aquatic organism passage grant, they look for a NAC assessment. It's just kind of like the standard. Then the NAC assessment, we try and do an inventory of the entire municipality if that hasn't been done. And then we have all of that data analyzed by the model, which gives you not only the aquatic barrier severity, but now you have a storm passability. It gives you the max storm that crossing can pass before overtopping the road. Then we work with the municipalities to prioritize those results, focusing on barrier severity, storm passability, and their local needs. Like Neil said, most of these highway supervisors already know what structures flood. Sometimes we'll even go to them and say, well, it looks like this one's going to flood. And they'll say, well, no, that one doesn't flood. So the model can be wrong. Then developing a management plan, putting all those ideas into action, and designing replacements and then implementing. And something that's important to know is that each step in this requires a separate funding source most of the time. So that's why it's challenging, because sometimes you'll get through one step and then the plans will sit on a shelf, or a new supervisor will come in and they'll have different priorities. So road stream crossings are off their list. So to conduct a NAC assessment, you can contact me or a local partner. There's other partners who do assessments. There's also private consultants who do assessments. We offer NAC trainings once or twice a year, depending on the need. And then if you do get an assessment completed somewhere in your municipality, it's important to include it in a municipal plan somewhere so that can be referenced in grant applications, because that helps score extra points.
A comprehensive plan. Is that what you mean?
In any plan. Yeah. So if there's culvert data, it should be mentioned. Well, any relevant plan, I should say. So like maybe an NRI, or, sometimes, if the municipality is not going to go for a full road stream crossing inventory and they only do parts of it, it may be worthwhile just including it in something like that. So looking for funding opportunities and working with other local other organizations like the Soil and Water Conservation Districts, Trout Unlimited, Cornell Cooperative Extension, and watershed groups. In this area, another organization that is, I think, important to talk about is the DEP. They have a lot of money for specifically projects like this. I can't speak to how that is distributed or anything like that, but if you are in the city watershed, they have money to help. Other funding sources can be found on the DEC website at our funding finder tool. And it's important to, if you're going to be applying for grants, to familiarize yourself with the state financial system, which was once the Grants Gateway. So developing designs, some municipalities need engineering designs, others don't. We fund designs through our tributaries restoration and stewardship grants. And these are all actually, sometimes people can do these in-house, but often they're outsourced to partners like TU or consulting firms, and they'll apply on behalf of the municipality to have the designs done. Implementation, it's best if the work can be done in-house to save some money. That's not always the case. Sometimes it takes creative solutions of combining in-house work and contracting to get these projects done. You know, it's important to, like Neil said, also be looking at other state and federal programs. Specifically the DOS money that's coming out and the Resilient New York money that's also coming out. That's the thing that most people don't know is the big bond act lump sum of money is being filtered through all of these other existing grant programs. So it's not like there's going to be like this bond act money pot. It's all just coming through existing programs. Removing a dam, you need willing landowners. So if the dam owner is not in, then there's no project. You're coordinating with partners in the DEC to find funding. Ongoing maintenance of a dam is way more expensive than removal, and it's a liability to the owner because of the safety risk. It can require a lot of outreach. So unlike culvert projects, which may take a year or two, dam removals can take much longer, up to, you know, a decade or more, depending on the pushback from the public, or if you don't have willing owners on both sides of the dam. And like I mentioned, there's 4 to 12 times as many dams as we think there are out there right now. So this is just a little map of where we've funded some culvert designs. All of the tan dots on there are assessed culverts, and all the stars are conceptual designs that we've funded through our grants program. We've replaced about 12 culverts so far in the last 7 or 8 years through our grants program specifically. But a lot of times what happens, like Neil said, is we fund the planning and then they apply to a program like WQIP, the Water Quality Improvement Program, which has a larger higher maximum, or a higher maximum, excuse me. And, you know, they can handle some of these larger projects. So just some current grant awards. We're removing the dam in Phillips, or at the Hoving Home and on Phillips Brook in Garrison. It was some weirs, and we're also replacing a culvert there just downstream. In Red Hook, we're helping design the replacement of 2 culverts. And again, the same in Milan. So those are just design grants. Some past successful grants. Show this one here. So just some culvert replacements that Trout Unlimited helped fund in the town of Copake and Akron. You can see here that, you know, the culverts are upsized so that they can handle more water and are more invisible to the stream. You can see here on the right, the city of Newburgh Strookfeld Dam removal in 2020. That's just a cool progression of the construction and what the stream now looks like on the bottom there. It's restored and free flowing, and if I remember correctly, I think they said they saw fish the day of the removal there. So this is another culvert replacement in Haddock Hill where they put a prefab bridge in. So you can see this was a pretty perched culvert. There was a big scour pool on the bottom where this picture was taken, and now this was a dry season, but you can see that this stream runs through there, and it's completely unimpeded. George Road, another perched culvert, and they just kind of dropped the culvert down. This one's going to take a little more time to heal itself. You can see that big scour pool on the tail end on the right side there. But this restored 3.5 miles of stream upstream. And another one in Ghent. Again, upsizing the culvert. You can see there on the left, there was a much smaller culvert with a huge scour pool. And they almost tripled the size of the culvert and kind of filled in some of that scour pool. And hopefully the vegetation here will reestablish and prevent that erosion from happening. So future work in this area, you know, developing management plans for Phillipstown and Putnam Valley, Ossining, because these municipalities already have about 75% of culverts assessed. So they're at the point where they could start pulling together plans and prioritizing, and then just kind of completing work for the towns and county culverts and the remaining municipalities. We don't really focus on any state-owned culverts just because of the scale of the project that would count. And the state does their own thing, the DOT. And like I said, other partners to consider: watershed groups, Cornell Cooperative Extension, Soil and Water Conservation District, who can also provide quite a bit of technical assistance when it comes to these types of projects. Trout Unlimited, private consultants, and the DEP. Neil mentioned our grants program. These are just the 4 categories of grants that we have: our local stewardship and planning, river education, tributary and restoration and resiliency, and river access. My work falls in the stewardship, planning, and tributary restoration and resiliency grant categories. And we anticipate a new round of funding this year. Typically, they're announced in the spring and our webinars are out, so they should be coming soon. These are the times. Neil mentioned these, so I can skip over this. This is also online. Some newsletters, if you guys aren't on our newsletters yet, and just the grants page there. And if there's any questions.
Thank you.
Mitzi,
So there was just a dam removal here that I think you guys funded, that Gareth Huffman.
Yes, yeah, I just presented on that today.
There, that was really, really exciting, watching that thing.
You're probably in my picture then.
I was the one that looked really excited.
Scott.
When was that?
I was invited to be in that picture too, because Gareth called me.
She as well.
He was short of money. And
Scott made that happen,
We found
yeah.
some of the Hudson River Foundation, some from Scenic Hudson to fill that out.
Yeah, they had to get creative on that one. That was a good project though, so.
It was.
Yeah.
That was very exciting. And they did have the trees for troops there too, I think. I saw the.
Yep, they did have, so I think they got trees from somewhere. I don't know if it was from Beth or not, but
Yes. When was it? To see it in action. When was it? It was very cold. It was a really, really cold day.
yeah, I
For that. So, exactly, a few months ago, but I wish we-
All right. Any questions for,
I have one question. So you mentioned the culvert under 20, bridge over 20. But if a culvert is attaching to pieces of land, but it's not a road, would that not, I mean, it's not gonna be would the bridge apply to something where there are there's vehicular traffic?
generally, these are, we don't deal with privately owned
Because that would be.
crossings.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if it's going under the road, and this distance is under 20 feet, it's a culvert. Even if it looks like a bridge, it's still a culvert. There's culverts that look like bridges, but they're called box culverts. They're all concrete, or they have like a deck and they're 2 abutments, but it's not technically a bridge. So it gets a little finicky.
So where does the 20 feet have to be?
Interesting.
Perpendicular to the stream.
At the crossing point?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
any more questions? Penny, would you like to say something? No?
Just thank you guys for having me be here. I'm learning a lot from you guys as well.
Well, thank you very much. That was both 2 really interesting presentations. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Neil.
Join us.
And I have a feeling we'll be asking you back sometime.